Thank you, Susan, and thank you so much for joining the Mid-Atlantic Teaching Artists Virtual Retreat, everyone. My name is Cavi Barnes, and I'm joined by my colleague from the New York State Council on the Arts, Christine Leahy. This session will be recorded and later shared. So please turn off your video if you would not like to be recorded. Oh, can everyone hear me? Okay, good. All right, great. Today's workshop is called Remote Learning for Media Arts, Case Studies from Magic Box Productions, and it will be led by Patrick Lovejoy and Danilo Randijc-Coleman. I'll now turn things over to our producer for a brief review of some technical housekeeping items.
Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Zoll. I'll be the producer today. On the next slide, I want to show you a little bit about the Zoom controls in the session. If you would like to pin the interpreter and only see the interpreter's webcam, you can scroll down to Interpreter Connie and click on her video in the top right corner where there's 3 dots, and then click on Pin Video. Or if you prefer to have everybody's video up, you can go to the top right and click on Gallery View, as you see the gallery view in that image there, and that will give you everybody's webcams. Or just leave it in speaker view. That's a toggle back and forth between gallery view and speaker view. Also, in terms of troubleshooting, on the next slide, we'll show you where you can find my phone number. If you get bumped out, you will just be logged, use the same link to log back in. Typically, that's the easiest way to get yourself back in. It is being recorded, as Cavi said, and will be shared later on NASA's YouTube channel. And there is my name, Susan, and my phone number. So if you want to jot that down, I will also chat it out to you in a moment. If you did get disconnected and couldn't get back in, you can call me on my cell. Now I wanted to move on to the some of the controls. This is a little blurry, but I think we'll get the point across here. So if you point and hover your cursor at the bottom of your screen, your controls should pop out. On the far right, it's hard to read, but that's chat. So if you click on chat, that will pop it out for you. So if you can go ahead and do that and just chat a quick hello so I know that you found it. Hi, Christopher and Gail and Tom, Janice and Jennifer. Great. So nice when everyone says hello. And then to the left of that, there's a participant panel. So if you click on that, it will pop out. And then I'm going to show you a couple things on that. So on the next slide, you'll see how to rename yourself. So if you want to change your name or add your pronouns, you would click and hover over your name in that list. Click on More and then choose Rename. So you can try that right now if you like. I see some people are already doing that. Great. Once again, first click on Participant to pop out that panel. And then one more thing while we're there, on the next slide I'll show you is some controls. They look a little different. They're at the bottom of that participant list. You should see a blue raised hand. So can everyone raise their blue hand so I know you found that? Gail, great. There we go. Everyone just popped up. Fabulous. And I'm going to go and clear it all. But if you do have a question or something, you can always raise your hand or type into chat. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Cavi, who will take it from here.
Great. Thanks, Susan. Patrick Lovejoy is program manager at Magic Box, where in collaboration with the Magic Box team, he's been working on designing remote lesson plans and content resources for New York City's Office of Arts and Special Projects. Danilo Randijc-Coleman is a filmmaker and a musician and a teaching artist at Magic Box Productions. Working with youth to create documentary film, stop motion animation, video art, and podcasting. I encourage you to check out Patrick and Danilo's bios on the NASA website. And please now welcome Patrick and Danilo, and let's begin.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. So I'm going to start us off, and then I'm going to pass it to Danilo. First off, we're really excited about this because we're going to open this up to a discussion towards the end. And really what this is about is just us sharing, you know, what we've learned over the course of, gosh, it feels like longer than just 5 or 6 months, but the transition from in-person to online for media arts. And by no means do we think that we are experts, but you know, every week is a new iteration of what works, you know, every group of students that you're working with, every, you know, all the different communities. So we're just gonna walk you through a few different case studies that we think are valuable and that we've learned from. And yeah, hopefully you guys will learn something, and we're looking forward to it because hopefully we can learn something from you guys as well. We open up the conversation. So as the presentation moves forward, feel free to either jot down some questions that you might have or comments, or you can add them into the chat. And we will take a look at that at the end, but we're happy to kind of stop and discuss at certain points as well. I'll just go to just a quick overview of what we'll be looking at. So I'll give a quick overview of Magic Box Productions, then I'll move on and we'll look at asynchronous specifically. And Danilo will walk us through best practices and specifically what he's learned from a case study that he did with students at IS 75. And then we'll move on to synchronous. And that's pretty interesting because what we're going to highlight is a collaboration between Magic Box and Theater Jacksonville. And if you're curious about why Theater Jacksonville, our founder and executive director, Nell Stokes, is long-time friends with the executive director of Theater Jacksonville. So it's not that we would love it. We would love for organizations all over the country to just reach out to us and collaborate. But that is why that collaboration happened. And one of the things I really want to kind of talk about an overview when it comes to that is the idea that media arts can be really support other art areas during this time. So I really believe in interdisciplinary kind of programming. And I think this is an interesting opportunity, and you'll see how that happened when we collaborated with Theater Jacksonville on their theater camp and kind of supported them in a different way and allowed the summer camp to transition from in-person to online. And then we'll open it up for comments and questions and hopefully a robust discussion. Okay, so Magic Box was founded in 2004 by our executive director, Nell Stokes. Obviously, we're a media arts organization. We work with New York City schools from K to 12, and we teach photography, animation, sound design, and filmmaking. And I would say the overall kind of mission is that we're really quite passionate about teaching digital and visual literacy. And as we all know, there couldn't be a more important thing in this time. I don't know about everyone else, but I think my digital literacy has definitely kind of ramped up a little bit over the past 6 months, learning all this different technology, Zoom, you know, Google Slides, how to, you know, use all these different apps. So, all right, we'll move on to, we'll get right to it. We'll move on to asynchronous lessons. Just real quick, show of hands, anyone who has experience with asynchronous lessons, has led asynchronous lessons, just a kind of thumbs up or just so we get a sense. Okay. Great. Awesome. Okay, so starting with asynchronous lessons, in the early period of transitioning in March and April from our in-person residencies, one of the things that was difficult for us was trying to figure out with media arts, how do we, we usually provide the equipment from our inventory, whether it be iPads or, computers or supplies, or the teacher or the schools do. So while we were trying to, hang on one second, my computer just unplugged. While we were trying to figure out how to make that transition, one of the things we focused on is very easy, low-tech activities that we could give to our students to, support them in a time of, it's difficult for everyone. We really wanted to give them something to do that was easy, that they didn't feel like, oh gosh, I don't have, an iPad, I can't do this. And one thing I want to focus on is the fact that, and I'll show a video of one of our teaching artists that created a very simple asynchronous lesson. It's the simplicity that we always went back to. As we started to scale up and as we started to find ways to use applications and do stop motion and do more complicated activities, we always came back to this idea of keeping it very simple. So I think the best thing to do is to share this video so you get a sense of simplicity, clarity, and I think this is a beautiful example from our teaching artist, Haley. So.
Hi everyone, I'm Haley with Magicbox. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a thaumatrope. A thaumatrope is a 19th century optical toy, and the word thaumatrope means spinning wonder. So when I actually spin my thaumatrope, you can start to see that I have flowers in a vase, and as they spin very quickly, it creates the illusion that these two images become one, and my flowers end up in my vase. So in order for a thaumatrope to work, we need three different things. The first thing is we need two separate images drawn on either side of our paper. The next thing we need is we need speed. We need to spin it quickly. Do you notice that if I spin it slowly, it doesn't really work? You definitely need to spin it as fast as you can. And the last thing you need is what we call a moment of rest. You'll notice when this actually spins around, there's a brief fraction of a second where you don't see either of the pictures. It's really when we see the side over here of the paper, that's what we call our moment of rest. So these three things, drawings, speed, and our moment of rest, is what makes this optical illusion possible. So I'm going to be showing you how I made my flowers in a vase today, but you can also be creative with what you would like to draw. So maybe you would like to draw a dinosaur in a city. Perhaps you would like to make a bird in a cage. Whatever you think would be really interesting or fun for you, feel free to be creative with your drawing. Here are some of the materials that you'll need to make your thaumatrope. Paper or a note card, a hole punch, but if you don't have a hole punch, you could also use scissors or anything else that's sharp. 2 rubber bands. If you don't have rubber bands, you could also use string or hair elastics. And then any other types of drawing tools that you might have. If you have crayons or markers, colored pencils, I'll be using this pencil and also these paint pens, but feel free to use whatever you have at home to complete the activity. So our first step to make our thaumatrope is that we're going to want to fold our paper in half. So I've already folded mine here, but I'll show you. I folded it this way, and then I opened it up. It's very important that you open it up so that nothing ends up being upside down if you don't want it to be while you're drawing. So I'm going to have each half open, and I'm going to draw 2 separate pictures on each one of these halves that are going to come together while it spins around. So what I'm planning on making today is a bouquet of flowers. So I'm going to put the vase on the top up here and then the flowers on the bottom. So now I have both of my drawings colored in, and I'm going to start with the next step, which is going to be to punch the holes. So I'm going to fold my thaumatrope.
Okay, so you get the idea. Clarity, simplicity, it's also so apparent in that video too, how asynchronous lessons are a lot more work for the teaching artist. But she spells everything out beautifully. One advantage to asynchronous is students can always go back and rewatch it as many times as they want. I'll also share this slide, which she included, which is just a one-page sheet. It's very clear, the materials you need, the ideas, and 3 steps, keeping everything super simple. And like I said, once again, this is really what we kept in mind when we started building towards more complex programming, which Danilo will do a deeper dive into. So really quick, just for the sake of time, I'll just say that when we started, the way to gather kind of what the students had at home as far as tech needs and everything was that we created a survey. So I'll just give a few examples of the surveys that we created. So this is for a stop motion animation survey that we sent out to the students. As you can see, what devices do you have at home? Check all that apply. Do you have access to the internet? How comfortable are you in using Google Classroom? And what is one thing you'd like to learn how to do in our class? So that's a short version. We did a more complex version, or I shouldn't say complex, but this was for a neighborhood news program that we did. And we sent out, and so you have the devices, then you have materials. And then it asked, what are you more interested in creating for our neighborhood news project? And this was like in April. So one thing I like about these questions is it gives the students a little bit of agency. With everything so like topsy-turvy, out of control, it's so difficult for students to be at home. This idea that they might have a say in what they're gonna learn and a communication, and even what time on Tuesdays work best to meet as a group. That can be difficult, you know, to get everyone online at the same time. So even that, they have a say. So those are the surveys, and I think it's a really easy, simple way to kind of get a sense of what everyone has, you know, at home to use. So now I'm going to pass it over to Danilo, and he'll get into the specifics of, you know, what he's learned and what he did with his residencies.
Thanks, Patrick. Hey, everybody. Good morning. So yeah, to give a little backstory on our work with IS-75, we were doing a stop motion program with 3 different classes, and the plan was to do a small group project, which each class would collaboratively create a film based on a book that we read. One of the things that became clear from the very beginning after talking to teachers and administration was that, like Patrick was underlining multiple times, easier and more accessible was the way that we wanted to approach it. So we kind of transitioned from a group model long-term project into a series of shorter individual projects. And that was in hopes of getting every student as engaged as possible, and also making it easy for students to get engaged. For instance, if a student misses 2 lessons, we don't want them to be excluded from lesson number 3, right? So we changed it into videos that had just a really short project that each student could do in a day. And we thought that made it easier for students to enter into our program, right? Also, since our stop motion is more tech dependent, we needed to think about how to make things as accessible there as well. And so as a result, we leaned into programs that were available on both Mac and PC and did not require any additional software. There's lots of online programs that use the cloud that can be accessible from a phone, from a computer. And I would lean into those because we don't know what students are using, and the easier it is for them to get to it, the better, right? So we actually used a program called Cloud Stop Motion, which is entirely online, as well as Google Classroom, which is also entirely online. We made the decision early, anything that they needed to download may provide one extra hurdle, right? So we can go on to the next slide. I made a series of 12 videos each week with a small project for students to do that gave them a little bit of background on how to do it, as well as an idea for a project. So let's take a look at about a minute of one of those just to get a sense.
So today, we're going to learn how to make our very own animations at home. Remember, you can make stop motion out of anything. So all you'll need for this project is a camera connected to either your phone or computer, and any objects that you want to animate. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need is a clean space to shoot your animation. You can either use a desk, like I'm doing here, or if you're shooting from the top looking down, you can use the floor as well. A couple things to keep in mind about your studio space. One, you're going to want to make sure it's really clean and tidy. Two, you're going to want to make sure that the light is good and is not going to change as you film. And three, you want to make sure that there's nothing happening in the background. You don't want to see anything moving other than your objects that are being animated. So for me, I'm going to shoot this way with the background being the wall.
So that's just a little bit of a sense of an introduction to our lesson. And then in this next clip I'll show you, this was me actually using the app itself, which I screen recorded using my Mac.
To take your first picture, click the red camera button to the right of the screen. When you do, you'll see your photo pop up on the timeline below. You'll also notice that you can now see the photo that you took as well as the photo you're about to take overlapped. This is so that if your character gets moved from the position you want, you can place them back without interrupting your film. Continue taking pictures until you have enough to create an animation. I would say about 30 or 40 to start is a good goal. If you make a mistake and want to delete a picture, all you have to do is click the picture in question, click the yellow film strip at the top of the screen, and then click the trash can. To see what you've got so far, click the play.
Yeah, and let me just jump in really quick. One of the things I really like about that is, once again, it kind of goes back to the concept that we were talking about with Haley's video. Super clear. You know, I love what Danilo did, where he's using the arrows, and the music's great too. It's kind of soothing. But yeah, I really love like how clear it is for the students. I will say, just as an aside, one of the things that was pretty interesting to learn from teachers and administrators when this whole thing happened was they were a little bit surprised, or a lot surprised, that their students weren't as tech savvy as they thought they were. You know, we see our students all the time on their phones and downloading this app and this app. You know, so we just think that, oh, that, you know, you give them the stop motion animation app, they'll get this very quickly. Turns out not really the case. So even more reason with these things to err on the side of super clarity. So I just wanted to say that. Thanks, Danilo.
Yeah. So yeah, and I already saw a question came in about tech, and that seems like to be one of the pressing issues for a lot of us, right? I guess to start at the very beginning, right, the things you're going to want to think most about when making your own films is your lighting, your sound, and your camera, right? In terms of lighting, you want to use a nice, well-lit room as much as you can without light behind you. And if you need extra light, you could even use something really simple like a clamp light. I use $5 adds a nice little fill on the side of your face, right? In terms of audio, I use an external microphone connected to my computer. Audio, we have noticed, is the thing that jumps out to people the most when it is not good, when something is messed up. You can even think about Zoom, right? If the video is a little smudged, that's okay if we can hear the person correctly. So I'd really, if you all foresee yourselves doing more remote lessons, I would definitely recommend investing in some kind of external microphone, either one that connects to your computer or connects to your phone, as well as a tripod or mount for whatever you're going to use to record your video. That is just going to make your life so much easier in the long run, and it will be an investment that will carry on for a long time, you know? Another suggestion I have when you're doing your lessons is to write a script and break it up into several different shots, right? This is actually one of the beauties of remote teaching for us, is rather than having to nail it on your first try, with remote teaching, you get a chance to take multiple takes, right? So maybe you record yourself doing one time, say, yeah, you know what, I could do that better. And then you can do it a second time and choose that second take to include in your film. I also, as you noticed in the film, tried to add captions wherever possible, music to kind of attract the students in, and screen record when possible as well. I recorded that using the screen recording function on my computer connected to my webcam. But my feeling is most people are going to be using their phones, which is totally fine as well. You'll just have to then move that footage into a place where you can edit. And to edit, if you're using a Mac, you can use iMovie, which is a free program, or DaVinci Resolve if you're using PC. After I made those videos, I also created a Google Slide instruction, kind of like you saw what Haley did as well. And I would attach both these Google Slides and the video to an assignment on Google Classroom. I found Google Classroom to be a really, really helpful tool. It keeps things really organized, and it worked so well that I've even considered, when we return to in-class instruction, using it as a supplementary tool for what we do. It could be online and students could return to it as a way to jumpstart their own ideas, right? And most importantly, Google Classroom made it really easy for me to talk to students individually. If they had a question, they could message me directly on Google Classroom. I would get a notification and I could respond to them privately as well. So it's another program I suggest familiarizing yourself with in these coming weeks. Over the course of our classes, over 50 student-made videos were submitted to me. And we can take a quick look at some of what they did now. Just to give you a sense of what they actually made all on their own in their home, right? So it is possible. So I want to emphasize the pros as much as possible. I think we're all really familiar with the cons of remote teaching, but some of the really positive things that came out of this, right, were that students who were interested in the project could really go deep, right? And I would get messages from them at different hours of the day, and I'd be responding to them individually. And in that way, this asynchronous teaching kind of became more expansive. There was the lesson that I created, but then there was the follow-up discussion. So it's something that I think we all need to conceptualize, is that this teaching remotely is not like a period. It's more like it's forever, right? It's going to keep coming back to us, and we're going to be wanting to be in communication with our students for when they problems. It expands the time frame for projects to get done, and it encourages students to really figure this stuff out on their own, right? I couldn't help them hands-on, so they had to do it on their own. The next slide, cons, which I think we all know, right, are we can't be there, we can't see what they're using, and to be perfectly honest, right, engagement across the board was lower. We noticed as the residency went on, less and less kids were involved, maybe getting, pressure from other classes, perhaps feeling like the lessons themselves were redundant, right? So to try to solve some of those problems, here's some of the solutions we came up with, right? For one, we really tried to be flexible. After we did about 8 lessons of stop motion, we noticed that engagement was down. So we pivoted into making videos about short filmmaking, and that kind of rebooted students' interest. So I'd say that's one big guideline to think about, is how can we make this flexible? How do we have multiple ways that our residencies can go, right? Another thing to think about is to be really engaged with the administrators, the teachers. Obviously, this is a struggle for us all the time, but in remote teaching, it becomes even more prevalent, right? Because we have so little communication with the students one-on-one that the more communication we could have with administrators and other teachers, the better. It has even led me to consider possibly having some kind of grading, right? I went to a school with no grades. You don't have to tell me how you feel about about grades. I am not pro grades, but as some way to build incentive, it's something that I've really considered as a solution to engagement that we didn't do this time around. I think another thing that would be really awesome is to add in a synchronous or collaborative element within your lessons. So for instance, you could create a Google Doc where every student could add to it. You could set up voluntary Zoom meetings every week or two. My feeling is that students would be happy to join those if they were given the opportunity. There's also some other awesome apps like Flipgrid or Padlet, and I'll write those in the chat as well, that give students a chance to engage in a more direct way that I think if I were to do this again, I would emphasize. And lastly, something I did was try to showcase student work within the lessons as a way to get students to buy in. I think we're going to keep moving for the time being, but since we talked about you all being this wellspring of information as well, I'd love to hear at the end, at the Q&A, if any of you have some ideas for solutions to some of those issues we found in asynchronous teaching as well.
Terrific. Thank you, Danilo. And yeah, just for the sake of time, we're going to keep moving on to synchronous lessons. So just a show of hands, who has experience with synchronous lessons? Okay, great. Great. Terrific. Okay, great. Our collaboration with Theater Jacksonville, really unique and exciting. So they have a summer camp every year that's theater-based. So obviously that they were either going to have to cancel it or figure out a way to go online. Our executive director, Nell Stokes, collaborated with them on this idea of how we can basically propose something that we called Creative Connectivity for Kids, which was the name of the new summer camp. I'll go to the next slide. There it is. Creative Connectivity for Kids. So that was the culmination of our collaboration. And basically what we decided was that we could frame so much of what we teach at Magic Box, but really frame it as teaching a lot of the skills and lessons that, you know, there's an intersection between theater and so many other art forms. So, for example, stop motion, we really focused on script development and character study. Radio play was all about Foley artists and the sounds that they create. And Danilo taught that course, and he'll go into more of a deep dive about that. So they created soundscapes, but they also got to play and act. Newsroom, which is a course that we usually teach, but it allowed them to develop the skills of performing as if they're a news reporter, but also, you know, interviewing and all these different things. And virtual museum was really about our photography residency coming from the standpoint of curating a story. The idea of what does a curator do? So once you take your photographs, what you're really thinking about is a through line. So that's a very, very, very shallow dive into the summer camp. But once again, as I mentioned at the top, I think it's a really interesting way of how, you know, this is a moment where possibly you can collaborate with another organization and try to figure out, you know, I come from a dance background. So I think a lot about, like, you know, dance is a very difficult thing to translate into online. But what if you were to take the stop motion course and, you know, kind of frame that as like, oh, we're going to think about choreography. We're going to think about, you know, creating these shapes as we would choreograph dancers. So that's just one idea, but there's so many different interdisciplinary angles that I think can really, it can be an opportunity. You know, this challenge that we're having can be a real opportunity. So I'm going to throw it over to Danilo again, if that's okay. And he's going to go into what he did for radio play, and that will give you a better sense of what that week was for the summer camp.
Yeah, so in terms of the radio play, we did this over 5 days. We had hour-long lessons every day with me. But then they also had 2 different periods with 2 different teachers. So whatever we did in our class, they could expand further. That was really ideal and not something that you'll often get an opportunity to do, right? But in this case, it was great. You can move to the next slide there, Patrick. Something I noticed in synchronous, if I had to choose, I would definitely put myself in synchronous is the better form, right? You get to see your students, they get to see each other, and furthermore, they have this socialization time. Like, even though it wasn't real life, it's so clear that they were so desperate for talking to each other, for working together, that we really emphasized that. I feel like in my in-class residencies, I sometimes forego games or icebreakers because I feel under the crunch, but we really did that. We pushed that constantly in the class, and the kids loved it, right? Even if it was something as simple as watching a movie together, which we thought, ooh, maybe we should make this short. They could have watched a movie together for an hour and just kind of been there sitting together. So anything that emphasizes that togetherness, I feel like, is the biggest guideline for synchronous teaching, as well as switching it up, right? You don't want to sit there and talk to them for an hour. You want to use those capabilities of Zoom and whatever program you're using to kind of emulate what you do in the classroom. You can use polls, like we saw at the beginning of this presentation. You can use breakout rooms to make small group work. You can even have a shared whiteboard that every student can add to. So finding ways to work that app to your benefit is really the thing that I would suggest, as well as, of course, having a good camera, good internet, good lighting, kind of like we talked about with the videos, and energy. Let's move on to the pro. Oh yeah, so here's I think maybe we might have to skip this example, Patrick, because we're running low on time. Maybe, you know what, play 1 minute of it. 1 minute.
Yeah. Do you want to just set it up?
Yeah,
Or...
so we wrote an entire radio play with the students both doing the voices and recording the sound effects at home. They then chose the music, and I added that in after the fact.
Coming to you from the Theatre Jacksonville Virtual Playhouse, in association with WMBE Productions, we present to you The Vanishing Emerald.
In the heart of the Atlantic Ocean, on a clear day with calm seas, a single expedition boat bobs along. On deck, we meet an explorer, prepping his scuba gear to go on a deep-sea adventure.
I think this is a great sport.
As good a spot as any. You take the dive, and I'll stay up here on radio if you need me.
Our explorer sits backwards on the edge of the vessel, pulls down.
Yeah, so pretty crazy we did that all on Zoom. You know, they even did their zipper in the microphone, and they're doing all their voices, and that was pretty crazy how successful it was, I think, for my first time teaching on Zoom. Again, emphasizing the pros. As to Chris, I see you just put that up. Yeah, we just collected the Zoom recording and used the audio, and I edited it in Final Cut. Emphasizing the pros again, like I was saying, socialization time. They were really into that, playing games, anything like that. We can see how they're doing, what they're maybe having trouble with. To move to the cons, as with the last one, there are technical issues that we sometimes couldn't address, either a microphone not working, easier for kids to just not participate if they'd like. And sometimes the lessons honestly felt a little short. So solutions to those, Nico, I will address that for sure. Like I was saying before, variation is a big one, right? Instead of me talking, I would show something, then we would do a group work, then we would even do independent work where the students could be on their own, but they have their video off or something like that. We'd also try to imagine if tech wasn't working, what's a backup plan, right? Do we have them write in the chat? And the engagement with the other teachers and the administration made this flow really easily, which made me feel that in the future, that needs to be an emphasis for any remote teaching, is that discussion and keeping track of what our students are and aren't doing is going to be that much more important, right? Without the ability to just see them in a class and gain their temperature just from seeing them. This is different, right? Addressing those two questions that came in, I am definitely doing way more prep and way more post-production, especially when I'm making videos. I'd say for synchronous teaching, it is pretty similar. I create my lesson plan and I just go ahead and do it. When I'm making my videos and editing, that definitely takes a considerably longer time, right? On Zoom for this class, we had 12 to 15 students at a time. Some of our Magic Box classes went all the way up to 20 or 30. And it seemed to work pretty well, right? This is another chance to employ those breakout rooms if your class is too unwieldy, and hopefully have one teacher in one and another teacher in another. Unless there is something else, I think this is where we were going to kind of open it up to questions and suggestions, solutions to some of these issues that we have run into. So we would love to invite anyone who has a question to raise their hand, or a comment for something that you have envisioned for solutions. So I guess, Patrick, we could just take them one by one.
Yeah, for sure. And Susan, are you there? If you can help us kind of.
So I see one, are teaching artists getting paid more for this time? This is a big question about intellectual property and payment. I have been resistant to the idea of just handing over videos, right? Because we don't want to just hand over our intellectual property and then people can use them ad infinitum. So I would make sure with whatever organization you're working with that it is very clear that if you're making asynchronous lessons, these are only for the class that you are teaching. And if they are not, or if they expect to use them for more things, that they need to create a contract about intellectual property that either deals with royalties or has an upfront cost for them to purchase that video from you. Otherwise, don't dip your toe in to where you know you're going to regret it. I have had discussions with that. Magic Box, honestly, has been very receptive to that. So I've been lucky in that way. But this is definitely a time to consider what you're putting out there, right? Especially as teaching artists.
Yeah, well said. And it's definitely a challenge to figure that out. And we are, you know, we're still, one of the things we really do is we just try to communicate with our teaching artists and try to figure out what's fair, what makes sense. But yeah, what we don't want is for one teaching artist to make a video and then we send it to a class and then they send that to the whole school and who knows where it goes. And then you just basically, everyone's just using that. So that is, it's definitely a challenge. And if anyone has any ideas, that's great, you know, because we're still, you know, coming up with different solutions for that.
The lucky thing is we are all, or many of us are artists, and we know how that part of the world works, right? So we need to just apply that to the work we're doing here as well. You know, teaching artistry was very simple. We go to a class, we teach a class, but now it's different. So just be very mindful of it. I saw, how do you use the breakout rooms? That is an option that any admin of a Zoom meeting can do. I would suggest just checking out a tutorial. It's pretty simple. I am not as familiar with Google Meets, Carol, but my feeling is that they also have a breakout room function. You would just have to, no. So in that case, maybe you make two separate ones. Maybe that's one option, or you just have different times for students to log in. Definitely makes it trickier. We do not have students lead classes, but it's an option, right? I think I have students lead activities within the class, right? I would say, okay, we're playing a game, you know, Amanda, you're gonna lead us. What are we doing? You know, but in general, as Patrick was mentioning, our kids are maybe less tech savvy than we expected, right? And so I think they still need that that guidance from us, even if when we come together, they want to discuss and lead the discussion. I'm totally in for that, but I think they still need a little bit of guidance, and I would lead that way.
Yeah. And as far as breakout rooms, I saw one question that addressed how many students do we have on Zoom. I mean, obviously it's the same as in person. The smaller, the better. I think with the first stop motion animation course that we had at Theater Jacksonville, we had like 25 to 30, and that was a lot. That's very difficult. And basically, if you can have all your students and see them all on one screen, you know, however many that is, you know, 10 to 12 or even less, it works out. And we noticed that for the second round, the stop motion animation, we were down to about like, just because it was later in the summer, 10 to 12, and it was like a real sweet spot. It was really nice. So just like in person, it can be too much. But I guess the solution to that would be if you have 25, and if I mean, if you have another teacher, or you have another administrator, that's when you would want to use breakout rooms to kind of, you know, get that more individualized attention.
Totally, yeah.
And there's some good responses from Amanda and Chris about copyright and looking at your contracts. So check that out in the chat. Yeah, are there any other questions or comments or suggestions? We have one more slide that we can offer up to that Danilo has about all the different applications, which I think is pretty helpful. So I'm just going to
that's a good idea. And I mentioned a lot of these in the chat as well, right? But these are some online. Some of these are downloadable. They're more for you than your students. But I think it's a great time for us to think about how, like for instance, even making a teaching artist Instagram, like maybe not using your personal one, for instance, but as a way to kind of jump in with students and kind of reach them where they're already using stuff. Or TikTok too, right, is up there. I forgot to put that one on there. And I was also going to say for older students, I feel like one-on-one consulting would be amazing, right? If you have a chance to meet with them. And, you know, I found that the kids that are interested will go that extra step. So obviously this is all subject to liability and school determinations, but where possible, I mean, I really want to push in this coming year for kind of a hybrid concept, is that we're never just doing only synchronous or only asynchronous, but we're finding a way to mold those two together, because I find that that most closely resembles what actual teaching is like, right? Is that sometimes they're on their own and they can do their own thing, and then they come back together and we discuss.
Yeah, that's great. And that's a great comment from Amanda here as well. Let's see, we have
go ahead, Patrick.
Oh, I was just going to say from Gail and Danilo, maybe you can address this. She asked, did you have any issues with off-task behavior?
You know, I mean, not so much, because it's like if they're going through the extra step to get on the Zoom meeting and their parents helping them log on, it's like if they want to mess around, they just wouldn't do it. Like the problem we're running into is less with behavior than just like not getting them at all. Like we don't know where they are, right? And we can't find them. If we can find them and they're coming, chances are that they want to be there and they're going to give us a lot of themselves, right? So I think the biggest thing for us to consider, and this is why I want to really hammer home again, like being in touch with the administrator or with the guardians, the parents, right? Something that we also often don't do, to just get a sense of where the kids are, why we're not seeing them, right? If we're seeing them, we've had great responses. I mean, amazing work, right?
Yeah, and Gail, to your question of the classroom teacher being present, we've had it both ways. Obviously, it's much better when the classroom teacher is there, just to have that support. And for the Theater Jacksonville, it was amazing because they had 2 teachers, as well as the director of the program, who knows these kids year after year. They work with them. So that was incredibly helpful to our teaching artists, because they could show up, do their thing, and just focus on that and not have to worry about behavior issues. And once again, same with in person. It's like, it's so helpful to have, you know, more eyes and more ears and, you know, just more help.
Another thing I was going to just jump in and suggest is just, you know, I threw a lot of apps at you, and I kind of quickly went over some of the guidelines for creating a video. So familiarizing yourself with the wealth of tutorials online is really helpful, right? For each of these things that I've mentioned, from Google Classroom to iMovie to Padlet, there are tutorials online to consider, right? And if you're struggling with any of those apps, I would say, you know, try to find some resources there.
Great. Well, if there's not, oh, go ahead, Danilo.
Question for you, I think more, Patrick.
I'm sorry, what was it?
Jeanette has a question.
Oh, have you just a question? Right. Well, that is still in flux. You know, we're definitely trying to figure out a model for pricing, and how to do that. And that's something that I would just advocate, to be in communication, and to also don't be afraid as a teaching artist, because I've been on both sides. I've been on the administration. I've also been an artist and a teaching artist. Just to not be bashful about, like, look, this is what my rate is for this, is what I think is fair. This is the amount of work I'm doing, to be really communicative. And as far as the school year booking, I mean, that's in flux as well too. You know, one of the things we're looking at is, like, maybe even how to create programs more like the Jacksonville theater model, where it's like kids can sign up. You know, so maybe this is allowing us an opportunity to expand. Okay, not only are we going to hopefully work with our partner schools in New York City, but what can we do for just any parent who's saying, I just want, you know, some after school activity for my student. Yeah, that's what I can offer. But it's definitely, it's ongoing. It's a daily conversation that we're having, for sure. But there's no set answer, sadly.
And just from the teaching artist perspective, you know, you're not under any obligation to hand anything over, you know, so just keep that in mind. You know, you have to advocate for yourself here first and foremost, you know.
Yeah. And we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to figure it out, you know. So it's, let's see. Jeanette has, okay. Yeah, for sure. It is tricky. Yeah. These are great. These are great comments. It's great to hear, you know, that, you know, we're all in the same boat. We're figuring it out. So, well, hopefully this was helpful. I think we're at the end of the presentation. It's great to hear feedback and your questions. And it's always, for us, even the questions, if we don't have the answers, it's clarifying to know that, oh, that these are questions that everyone's dealing with. We take it back and we ruminate about it and try to come up with more solutions ongoing. But hopefully, you know, in general, we can all look at this as an opportunity instead of course, it's always a challenge. It's always a challenge, but have moments of, like, okay, but where's the opportunity for this? Where can we get into an expansive mindset and really think about, okay, well, what could we do in this arena that we wouldn't be able to do in person? And to kind of just every once in a while kind of shift our perspective a little bit, as hard as it may be with the daily challenges. So yeah, well, thank you all. It's been great.
I'm going to jump in because we're just about at time. Thank you so much, Patrick and Danilo. This has been fantastic. And thank you so much to everyone who's attending today's session. Before we end, we'd like to take a quick minute to hear from you about how this workshop resonated with you. So our producer, Susan, is going to post a quick poll. Look out for that. And recordings, excuse me just a second, toggling between a couple things. Recordings of this workshop and others will be available on NASA's YouTube page within a week. So look to the chat also to see a link to our Facebook group. And please join us there to offer your reflections on today's workshop. Also, watch your email inbox for a brief survey that will be sent on each Friday of the retreat. So you can let us know what you think. And the 2020 Mid-Atlantic Teaching Artists Virtual Retreat is a co-sponsored project of the Mid-Atlantic State Arts Agencies in partnership with the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies. We are grateful for the generous support of these collaborators and grateful for your participation today. Thank you so much and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Christine. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all.